Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are. If this is your first time here, thanks for checking it out. If not, thanks for coming back. I'm Tom Gentry, and this is The Path to Authenticity. This episode features a conversation with a therapist in Austin, Texas, named Angela Abide. And I learned about her on Instagram, where she has an account called Mission Manhood, the same name as a podcast that she does. And she's just someone I've followed for a while, and I appreciated the content she shared. So I wanted to learn more about her and hear what she had to share about working with men, why she decided to make it a priority in her practice. She was in an episode of 20 Questions a while back. And we actually had 2 long conversations, so I'll probably be using some of what we talked about somewhere else. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Here you go. Angela Abide. Instagram. I used to find a lot of guests on Instagram, but that hasn't really happened for a while. But I've followed your Mission Manhood profile.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you've commented on a couple of my posts, and I've appreciated what you've posted, and I just decided, I really need to reach out to you and have a conversation with you and learn more about who you are and how you ended up with a passion for, helping men.
Yeah.
And from what I've read about you, I know that's not the only thing you're passionate about. And I've listened to your podcast and was impressed with it. Well, there's the sigh. I'll explain the sigh because I don't want you to take it the wrong way. So I'm an addiction counselor.
Okay.
And, I kind of got into all this manhood stuff.
Yeah.
Because I had to, I had to get better. And then I was able to apply the things I learned in a marriage and in a divorce and being a father. I was able to bring all that into my work with young guys. Mm-hmm. And so it's just kind of snowballed, but it all kind of started with Robert Bly, Iron John. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
That's one I have on my shelf that is on my to-do list because so many men mention it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'd even met him one time and met him at a conference and got the book signed and kind of read through it. But then what ended up happening is a couple years down the road, I ended up in marriage counseling, and this guy was like maybe the third or fourth therapist who we had seen. Mm-hmm. And by this time it was my ex-wife's a therapist, so it was, I don't care who we see, but we need a new therapist, and it can be whoever you want as long as neither of us know him or her. And she chose this guy who was a pastoral counselor, and he started talking about Iron John, and he really brought it to life for me. And that's where the real change started to happen. Wow. It's when I learned that I wasn't showing up in my life. I wasn't being the real Tom. I was so afraid of abandonment and, and not even like on a conscious level. It was deep and it was rooted in my inner child, Yeah.
Yeah.
But Robert Bly, he talks a lot about men need other men. And, he doesn't at all disparage the contribution that women make in helping men, but he also talks about how only a man can really teach a man how to be a man. And, what I want to say about listening to your podcast is I've witnessed sort of a lot of female therapists who just kind of do men's groups, and I've sat in on some stuff, specifically on Clubhouse, where the male leadership energy was missing. Mm-hmm. And what I really appreciated about your podcast is that you come from a learning perspective. You're very open, and you're seeking information rather than just kind of going out there and trying to fix all the guys, right? Yeah. Because that's what it has felt like watching some women do this. And there was one conversation I was a part of where it probably lasted an hour and a half. And at the end, this woman who was hosting it, who has a decent sized community of men who she, it's all about giving them a place where they can talk and connect with each other and feel safe and all that stuff. Well, she posed a question to everyone, and there were like 40 guys in here, at the end. And that was, if a close friend of yours was dating your cousin and you found out he was cheating on her, what would you do? And I was maybe, if there are 40 guys, I was like 36th or 38th in line to speak.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to all these guys, and it's, it's not cool, but it's none of my business. And I'd tell him he better stop, or he better stop before they get married, or all these like wishy-washy sort of. And she wasn't saying anything, and finally it got to me, and I said, I'd go to him and tell him, either you tell her now or I'm going to tell her. Yeah. And it was just like, they needed that, like strong, direct, decisive male energy and direction. It was just, they were just all kind of, more or less lost. And I haven't really gone back to that since then. And I'm just kind of leery of, here's what I really sort of equate it to in my world, being a 12-step guy who's been sober longer than he was alive before he stopped drinking at this point. Yeah. If you go to a men's meeting, it's a completely different atmosphere than it is if you go to a co-ed meeting. Uh-huh. There's no bullshit.
Right.
There's no posturing. There's no, because you're not going to get away with it. It's just not the same energy. So anyway, I just did a lot of talking, and you're my guest.
That's okay. I think it really set the scene, and I mean, there's a lot that you said that I agree with. And, you know, it might sound old fashioned or traditional, or some women might, you know, recoil at this. But, you know, if you're a woman working with men or working in men's work, I think it's really important that you know your place. And having sons, I know that they need spaces with me not there. And even, you know, from as young as I can remember, I would say, that's how you talk on the playground with your friends, or that's how you talk in the locker room. And I was trying to help them distinguish that that's not bad. I'm not telling you that's bad, but I'm a lady. And in my presence, you need to behave differently without making it this big guilty deal, you know? And at the same time, if I am an aspiring reporter and I go in the locker room and I'm interviewing guys, I don't expect them to act any differently because I'm there, because I'm walking into their world. And I think, you know, with all of our political correctness, and we've just created a big mess, and we don't value the uniqueness and contributions of each side. And I think that's one of our big problems right now. So I have these young guys coming into my office, and they're almost apologetic for their masculinity. They have no idea how to be in a relationship, or, you know, be that hero or go on that hero's journey. And I think for me, my role is to help them discover where they've been, who they are, why they are the way they are, and maybe see what they need to do for themselves so that they can be in a position where they can be that hero and go on that journey. But at that point, to me, they go to the men. And, you know, they, just like in the initiation, I learned from my mom. I learned very valuable and important things. There are things that are imprinted on me. And then I go to the men. And just like with my sons, I don't always want to be the queen. I am raising men, and eventually I expect them to become my king. I want to relax. I want them to be, you know, in charge of their life and their surroundings. And I want them to help take care of me when I get older. And I don't want to always be in charge of them. And I feel the same way about my clients. I mean, I have certain things that I can offer you, and then at some point you won't need me anymore.
Well, and that's the point, right? Of therapy, to not need the therapist anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey folks, Tom here. I want to take a moment to ask you to subscribe to my Substack publication. The original purpose for creating this podcast was to cultivate an audience for my writing, and I'm publishing now more than ever. I'm sharing free content every week with commentary on personal growth, emotional literacy, men's issues, relationships, and more, as well as audio content for paid subscribers. Please check it out by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting tgentry@substack.com. I'm really careful about entering into the kind of conversation I just did with you about women and their roles in helping men, because I also feel like there are a lot of men who aren't doing anything to help other men. And if women are willing to do it, then who am I to complain about that? You know, we need all the help we can get. I really feel that way, but it's what you said about understanding your role. I mean, that's the best thing I learned from Little League, is knowing what member of the team I am and what my role is, and being able to sort of roll with that, you know? Yeah. So I appreciate that. And, you know, it also kind of, it was a great interview with Traver Boehm, who I've followed online. I haven't read his book. I'm going to after listening to that. And I was what caught my attention immediately was when he talked about asking someone to be on his podcast who told him no And when he asked for an explanation, the guy said, because every men's movement goes alt-right.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's so many guys on Instagram who say a lot of really good things, and then they lose me because they say something crazy, you know, and they say something really judgmental. You know, the big one I see a lot is never date a feminist or never marry a feminist, or, I mean, stuff like that. And then, you know, another thing I see is right now, a lot of women sort of, propagating misogynistic messages that are, you know, talking about body counts and, you know, if you have a high body count, no guy's that's your value. No guy's gonna want to be with you. And just really sort of women attacking other women. And it's just like, oh my gosh. But a lot of these accounts that I follow, it's like, a lot of it, it's just, I want to know what's being said. Mm-hmm. You know, I want to know what's being said because I want to be the voice of reason, you know? So.
Yeah, that comment, I understood exactly what he meant. I don't think it's always alt-right. It's just the extreme of whatever you are.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of a conservative, traditional type Christian group, you tend to start leaning in that direction after a while. And, I mean, I have an example of that in my own, a guy I interviewed at one time, just had a really great vision for masculinity and the reconciliation of the masculine and feminine. And I don't know what I did at some point to turn him on me. But now we've gotten to the point where the last interaction we had, which was last week, he was quoting a scripture from me that women are to remain silent and not try to teach men. And, you know, that's just a perfect example of him going from this man that I was like, wow, your vision is so incredible, to now he's telling me to shut up and sit down.
Right.
And, but it's not just the traditional Christian. It's the workout guys. They go to the extremes of that. It's all the things. And there's so many problems in the men's work, and I have to walk on eggshells, but I know I can't leave right now because there are so many problems. And one of the main problems is it's very homo. And I don't mean that as homosexual. I just mean it's one sex. It's masculine. And I get why they're that way, but nature and life and everything is showing us that our well-being is a dance between these two energies, the known and the unknown, the logical and the creative, the masculine and the feminine, regardless of your sexuality. And we all have that in our heart. We all have to get that balance right in our own self, in our relationships, and then in our communities. And if it's just man, and defending ourselves against these feminists, these evil feminists, and, you know, just having the brotherhood and not trying to figure out, the other, the inner, the emotions. And, you know, sometimes people err on that side as well. They get so emotional that, they err on that side. But I do think that my main message in the man's space would be, we have to get that dance down.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of the observation I made about this world, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago when I really started to dive deep and it was really before you started seeing all these people on Instagram posting this stuff, is, you know, all the books you see out there for men, most of them are either about getting laid, making money, or finding Jesus. Mm-hmm. All of them. And, you know, there's nothing out there really about being fully integrated as a human being. Like, And I really started to kind of go down this rabbit hole of what does it mean to be a man, you know, after reading the Robert Bly stuff. And then I moved on to Sam Keane, who wrote Fire in the Belly, and on and on and on. But I started to entertain this question. And then, you know, eventually what I came to realize is it's really subjective. It's really who you ask. There's some commonalities. You know, there's something about being a protector and a provider and being a good parent and all that kind of stuff. But that's really about it.
Yeah.
That's really it. And eventually what I concluded is that, at least for me, the question isn't, what does it mean to be a man? For me, the question is, what does it mean for me to be a man?
Yeah.
How do I need to live to be grounded in my masculinity and to like really step into my power? And to me, that doesn't really have anything to do with being a follower, you know? And then one of the things I see a lot out there, not as much lately, but for a long time, is all these guys telling women, and even other women telling women, that you need to let him be a man. You need to let him be the leader. And it's like, to me, if you're kind of missing the point. You know, a man doesn't need permission to be a man. He doesn't need anyone to tell him that he can be. Am I really a leader if you're telling me I can be? Doesn't that make you the leader? Yeah. And so there are all these, just all these mixed messages. And then the Me Too stuff, I do understand how sort of the ground beneath a lot of men's feet just felt like it just moved and they're completely lost. But also, you know, we didn't treat women all that well for a long, long time. And it's like a lot of guys didn't have a filter. Felt like they could say whatever. And so now what it seems like to me is all of a sudden, well, you know, I don't even know what's okay to say anymore. And the way I wrap my head around that is, well, that's because you never had to use a filter before. And now you do. And it's just about learning how to have a filter and use the filter. And for me, like Traver talked about, I think he said he had 2 sisters. I have 5. So 5 older sisters, and I'm the youngest of 8. So wow. I saw a lot, you know, and I've always felt pretty comfortable around females and, you know, a lot of the like dominance sort of stuff. I just never got it, you know, It just never really clicked for me. So anyway, yeah, it's great to talk to, you know, a like-minded.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of things that are true. And that's where I think a lot of people really mess up. They're looking at it as this is true. And if this is true, that can't be true. But usually there's at least 2 things that can be true. And one of those things is, like I see with my sons who are 18 to 24, they're just almost paralyzed, to your point. They don't know what's okay to say. If they go to college and have orientation classes on consent, I mean, it's really, there's no organically flowing chemistry anymore. It's like they're so tied up. The good guys are tied up with, am I doing it the right way? Should I get them to sign a consent form? I mean, it's kind of nuts. But what's also true is that women are still dealing with the assholes of the world.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, I have personal stories of just in the last year or so going out with, you know, a friend and just being completely shocked with the way we were treated, you know. just in a friendly neighborhood type establishment. So good guys have no idea what women endure. And because they would never think to do that. And they were not taught to do that. But, one thing you said about all the different types of guys and only one way to be a man, that's another one of my pet peeves. And that's one reason I like Traber's work too. He seems to be more, encompassing. And the analogy I always use is like The Rock and Mr. Rogers. And why is only The Rock acceptable, like in men's work now?
Right.
And I think a men's group, men's work, a brotherhood should look more like Ocean's 11. You know, where you have the little guy that does gymnastics that can, you know, shimmy around in the ceiling and get under the radars. And then you have the really intellectual guy. And then you have the strong guy. And you have the leader. And, you know, we need to make it okay to be all kind of different kinds of men. And it shouldn't just be this men's group is for the strong people and this men's group is for the spiritual people and this men's group is for the, you know, sensitive poet people. I think ideally we would be incorporating and forming these like incredible brotherhood teams where, you know, iron sharpening iron. I'm picking you up and you're picking me up and we're helping each other learn about the nature of reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, one of the things that I've observed in my career, just, you know, working with a lot of guys, and a lot of the groups that I have done have been with guys in early recovery from substance use disorders. And a lot of times they had co-occurring issues, but, you know, I've met a fair number of homosexual guys who were a lot more masculine than most men I know. There really isn't a formula.
Right.
You know, and you can be The Rock and do all the things The Rock does and still not be standing in your masculine power.
Yeah. It very quickly can become symbolism over substance. So I'm playing the part. I look the part. I say the right words and I've read the right books. But at the end of the day, how am I the king? Am I the warrior? Am I the magician? Am I the lover?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, what I really believe is that the missing piece is our relationship with our emotions and how we're navigating that, or whether we are, really is what it is. Because so many of us, and it's not only men, it's women too, but it's like women have this range of emotions that are acceptable for her to experience and express, and then men have a smaller range. But we're all limited in our culture. We're not very good at it. You know, we're not good at it. We avoid it. And I just feel like that's the big thing. We have to get out of this adversarial relationship with our emotions and recognize that they're a source of power. And if you want to like hear about my pet peeve, it's the whole idea that there's a feminine side, getting in touch with your feminine side, and the idea that men and women are really fundamentally different from an emotional standpoint. I just don't buy it. I don't. I just think we're indoctrinated differently. We're socialized differently, and we're crippled because of it. It's not because we're born with any different capacity to experience emotions. And, you know, I mean, the other part of all this is that when you've lived your entire life that way, as a guy who just represses everything or avoids everything or is walking through life kind of numb, it takes a lot of courage to decide to face it and then actually do it. It's painful. And most guys don't want to go anywhere near that stuff. They don't even want to talk about it. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a range. I think you come here as you are. And I think, little kids kind of tell you who they are and show you who they are. And you have some very, very feminine women and some very, very masculine men and everything in between. You have masculine women and feminine men. And some of that has to do with our personality that we come here with. And some of it has to do with the nurture and nature. But the idea is that I feel like we have to balance that out for ourselves. So if you're an extremely masculine man, it might be more challenging for you to get in touch with that and to become a good leader for yourself and nurture yourself and care for yourself because it's foreign. You're so good at the outer. You're so good at the logical. And on the flip side, you can see that with a woman who's very, very feminine. She might naturally in the outer world become a damsel in distress because she doesn't really know how to be in the world. And you can see how both of those could set you up for a lot of heartache in the world if you can't learn, because that woman's always going to be looking for somebody to cover her, which might make her make a decision to get the wrong person. The man's going to look for completion if he can't access that by himself. And so I feel like that is the first dance, is to figure out in your heart how to be a good mother and a good father to yourself. And if you're a masculine man, the father might come really naturally to you. But how are you feeding yourself? Are you getting enough sleep? Do you allow yourself the rest when you're stressed? And to your point, the emotional part of it is vital. If you can't manage that, you're not going to be really great in your relationships. You're going to outsource that stuff to other people, which sets you up for really difficult relationships. And I feel the same for a woman. She's got to learn the basics of caring for herself and setting boundaries for herself, and being a good mother and father to herself. The difference, and I'll just say this quickly, is that women are allowed and encouraged to learn how to operate in the world. So in our modern society, if you have a girl in your household, you're going to teach her that, yes, it's okay to cry. It's okay to have your emotions. And hey, let me show you how to change this tire, because if you're ever caught on the road by yourself, you're going to need to do this. And, oh, you want to go to that college? Sure. Women can do anything. And yeah, it's still okay to cry and do all those feminine things as well. But in the typical household, for the men, it's like, hey, you need to be tough and strong. You need to protect your sister. You need to learn how to change this tire. But we're not really showing them that, yes, you also need to learn to dance with this other side. And it's almost looked down upon if a boy child or a man child, leans in that way or expresses that. You try to kind of steer them away from that. Mm-hmm. And so I think women have an advantage in that way, that we're trained in our modern society that, yeah, you can do and be whatever. And it's perfectly okay for you to be feminine. And then also if you want to take on these big outer challenges, that's cool too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like going through life with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah, and we're not balancing it out for the guys in the same way.
Yeah. And, it's, there's this intergenerational aspect of it too, like you're talking about the young guys who you see now who just kind of don't know what to do. It's because they had dads who, didn't know how to teach them what to do. Right. And I think as time goes on, generation after generation, we're getting a little bit better. Like I just turned 50, and a lot of guys my age, a lot of men I know who wouldn't dare imply that they're not masculine. They're not afraid to shed tears.
Yeah.
Like they'll cry with me, and they're not gonna be embarrassed about it, But you go 20 years older, mm-hmm. and they're not comfortable with seeing me cry, let alone them cry,
Yeah.
But it's getting better. It is. And
I do think it is, yeah.
Yeah, and then one of the things that I get so sort of locked in on the emotion stuff with men, and I have to remember sometimes that there is sort of a range of that personality is part of it. You know, I mean, I have a son who's about to turn 17, and I mean, it's always been so important to me to have intimacy with him and have him feel safe with me, that he could come to me and talk to me about whatever. But, you know, he's not as touchy-feely as I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I kind of had to learn that the hard way, you know? Yeah. And now it doesn't mean he's not emotionally intelligent, because he is.
Right.
I mean, he's a whiz with boundaries and limits and all, you know, I mean, he's really, really solid. But
yeah,
it doesn't have that same sort of depth of emotional experience or he's not interested in it, you know? Like, I'm fed by it, I think.
Yeah.
And there's part of him that just doesn't, you know, he's matter of fact, you know, concrete, and, you know, he's an artist too. He does, you know, sings and dances and all that stuff. Yeah. But it's, and in terms of where we fit and on that, range that you talked about, what I've heard described as this sort of continuum of androgyny.
Yeah.
That we all fall somewhere on.
Yeah.
And we kind of attract the opposite pole of where we are. But most people don't want to hear anything about that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the reasons we're in such a predicament currently is because we haven't allowed that. You know, it's
right.
If we would allow somebody, like a child, show me who you are. And for example, like if back to the family, you know, I'm from the South, and if you have a little girl who wants to go hunting with daddy, it's like, okay, here's your camo, and, you know, go kill the deer, and he's celebrating and taking pictures and all that stuff. I mean, she might go on to be a cheerleader at Ole Miss or whatever, but we celebrate that whatever you want to be, honey,
right.
For the women. But if the boy child says, I'm not really comfortable shooting or killing things, Dad, I think I just want to draw my art book today. You know, it's a disappointment.
Right.
So instead of going out and getting art books of the greatest artists that have ever lived and looking at those with our son, there's this underlying kind of disapproval. And I think that causes a lot of pain for men, you know, to not be accepted by, you know, these guys that you look up to, whether that's in a brotherhood or your family or your brothers or whatever. So allowing people to be who they are and express their gifts.
Well, and I know for me, you know, I mean, you have 3 sons. I have 1. I mean, he's been my greatest teacher. There's no question about it.
For sure.
But I grew up playing baseball, you know, and I wasn't close to my dad. You know, he was aloof and did the best he could, but was, you know, pretty stoic.
Yeah. He was that generation.
He was. And, you know, like I said, I'm the youngest of 8. So he was born in 1925. Like,
yeah.
So Depression era, World War II. So it was really important to me to be different with my son. And, you know, I love baseball. Baseball's my first love. Like, when I thought about having kids, of course, we're going to play catch and do all that stuff. And I'm going to teach them how to play baseball, and it's going to be great. You know, the sort of pictures we paint for ourselves before becoming parents. And, you know, he's as athletic as any person I've ever met. He's just not into it.
Yeah.
He's not into it. And because of the work I've done on myself, I just wanted him to be happy, you know, Now I had to work through that. I had feelings come up about it.
Yeah, it's a disappointment.
But I did work through it, and I wasn't disappointed in him.
Right.
What I realized is I was doing or risking doing what parents aren't supposed to do, which is have my needs met by him rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had to, reorient. But then, when that shift took place in my mind, I don't care what he does. I just want him to be happy. I want him to find something to be passionate about and to love, because the kids who have that do better than kids who don't.
Yeah.
And when it eventually became performing arts, and, it was as I was approaching divorce, my ex-wife just assumed that I was going to be disappointed. And it's not because of anything I did. It's because that's the way we are in this culture. And I mean, I kind of took it personally because, for God's sake, he's my son. I love him. Yeah, I just want him to be happy, but that's how deep that runs. And I'm glad to hear you point this out, this observation that we don't do this with girls. Girls have the flexibility to be versatile and to do things that are associated more with manhood. But, it's usually not the other way around.
Yeah.
Or there are no limits at all, Yeah. Which is also weird. But going back to this androgyny thing, what you're talking about, just letting kids be who they are. I mean, that's one of the things that breaks my heart about all this trans rights stuff, because first of all, what I think about is how painful it must be to feel like I'm in the wrong body. So I have compassion for them, but also like to see now a son who goes to a high school and, it's a much different time. The kids who in my high school would have been, on the fringe, nobody would have talked to them. Nobody would have engaged with them at all because they were androgynous or whatever. Those kids who just, you look at them, back then, I knew they must be profoundly sad. Those kids are accepted now. It's okay to be those kids now. And that's what that's what I want to see, like what you're talking about. Like I think there's a line too far, which thank God I don't have to worry about that with a child of mine. But I think generally accepting people for who they are and recognizing that what we want for ourselves is, I believe, is written on our hearts by our Creator. And we're at our best when we follow that. Yeah.
I think, as a parent, we have a sacred trust. And, I learned from my mother, who was a devout Christian, but she never really looked at us as her children. She looked at us as, God's children, like life's gifts to itself, And I think in that role, she did have some fear that, we would not choose the right path or whatever. But she did a really good job of showing us love and support and being our biggest fans and not insisting we choose one thing or another. And I think that's the greatest gift that we can give our children, is just to let them be who they are and let them explore and let them have a really safe environment to do that. And for me, just for the record, and I know this is a very unpopular opinion, but part of that sacred trust for me is to hold the space for you to be exactly who you are. And then when you become an adult, you can make the more permanent decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that with tattoos or anything that would be a permanent solution. And so, having the experience of having a 24-year-old and a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old, I have seen all of them. My 24-year-old currently is blossoming into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And I can really identify 4 distinct stages that he was in. And I'm so thankful that in stage 2 or 3, we didn't have to deal with a issue that would have, altered him permanently forever.
Right.
At 24, where he is now, I don't care what he told me. I don't care if he wants to get a back tattoo or, he is a heterosexual male, so I'm not faced with, any kind of transgender issues, but he has earned the right and the honor to be an adult. And my job at this point is to say, you go, you live your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's none of my business anymore.
Right.
And, my 18-year-old was extremely ill, severe brain inflammation, which manifested as mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many things that he came up with as solutions to try to make himself feel better at that time. And, I'm still haunted by some of that stuff that we dealt with, but it makes my blood run cold when I think about had we made any kind of permanent choices or decisions at that time. And now that he's a young man who's healed and whole, and that we would have to live with those now.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just am so much more comfortable with an adult making an adult decision for themselves when they're an adult. And so that's kind of my take on that. But
I'm with you. And, I think, I don't know, there probably are exceptions, but, I wouldn't want to have to be in the position to decide that.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the greatest skills that we can develop as a human being is the ability to live with some measure of confusion. And, I don't have to have all the answers right now. Yeah. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to be confused. And in fact, I had this conversation with my son at 12 or 13 years old. You're supposed to be right now. It's the most confusing time of life.
You're supposed to normalize that and to,
right.
Honey, learn to hold the space for these bad feelings because it's going to make you stronger.
Right. Right. And you don't want to make a decision. It's like that time of life. Kids are so brutal too. If you label yourself a certain way, then that's what you are. That's kind of what you are. And that's how people treat you. And, it's a tough time of life. And man, it's a hard time to grow up too. There's all that stuff going on in the world where I don't know anybody who doesn't know someone in their life, a kid who's going through that, some kind of transition or something. Practically everyone. But also, emerging adult males are profoundly lost.
Oh yeah, they are.
And it's that really just breaks my heart. Like for me, I was lost in certain ways. Like I didn't have the skills to navigate through my emotions. And so I drank it. That's what I did. I drank because that's what all the guys in my life did. That's what they did. And nearly drank myself to death by the time by the time I was 23. But now I still had so much direction. I had things I was interested in. I had, things I loved. And so when it came time to become sober and stay that way, there were things I wanted to do with my life. And as it pertains to addiction, the onset of use is so much younger now than it used to be. And just hard drugs, and that I encounter a lot of young guys who they don't even know what they like because they haven't had an opportunity to develop their personality, because by the time that stuff starts to happen, they're already getting high, There's all that. Yeah. And then that's not even to mention the porn addiction that's happening at epidemic levels.
I've touched on that on the podcast some.
Yeah.
It's really a bad problem.
It is. And, I meet guys who, if I was their age, I'd be dying to lose my virginity. Mm-hmm. But, they haven't, and there's no sense of urgency. And their whole, the whole paradigm for that part of their life is just so different.
That the porn really messes with desire and that burning that, a man feels like he has to satisfy. And I think about like my father growing up in the 50s, and, they would get dressed up and they knew that they had to look good, and they did their hair and they put on the clean jeans, and it was just a game. They all went out to the local places and met up with the girls, and they were all playing this little game. And if you got told no, your only option was to approach another woman, Mm-hmm. And now, if you dare venture out or maybe text somebody, don't even get in close contact, and you're told no, it might send you in a spiral for a month where you go watch, violent porn toward women because you're so angry that you got rejected. We've set ourselves up in a really, really terrible place, and it's messing with the natural instincts that men and women have. So
yeah, and it's more women now too. It's not just men. It's but I do feel like on some level the answer's all the same for all this stuff. If you can nurture a good relationship with yourself, and that's where all the healing starts,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I use internal family systems therapy a lot. And so they use, the self, which some people might call the spirit. So if you think of it like in terms of body, mind, and spirit, you could use self as well. But self is like the uncorruptible. It's uncorrupted and incorruptible. It's this source. And, if you can learn to live there and to, be aware of your emotions and be the observer, I think that's one main thing that we don't teach people, is that there's the known, like what we can see, what we're taking in our brain like a computer. There's the unknown, which is like our unconsciousness or these crazy emotions that pop up. And then there's the knower or the observer. And, I tell people the reason that you discipline your mind and discipline your body is to make space for the self or the knower. And to your point, when you've done that, or when you do that, when you stop numbing and stop drinking or stop watching porn and get yourself to a point where you're satisfied with yourself and happy and feel like you're going somewhere, and you're operating from that deeper level of consciousness, that self, and you're being a good mother and a good father to yourself, you're nurturing yourself and you're providing structure and order for yourself, that's when you can really, on most days, look in the mirror and go, yeah, I'm satisfied.
Hmm.
And we're not telling people that. We're not telling people about that.
No. Well, that's one of the things I want to do, is keep, ringing that bell. I do a men's group once a week. And, with a group of guys, we've been meeting every Monday night I started it before COVID, but once we got on, the virtual thing, we've been doing it every week, aside from a holiday here or there that falls on a Monday. And it's been great. Like, really, the one requirement I've had of all of them is if you're going to do this, you're going to be committed to it. Mm-hmm. This isn't like, most men's groups, they might last 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and that's it, Yeah. But we need each other. We need each other. And, the kind of stuff, I was talking to one of the guys in the group early this morning who's been going through just one of the most difficult challenges in close interpersonal relationships you can possibly imagine. It's been an endurance thing for, it's been going on and on and on. And he just keeps showing up as the best man he possibly can. Not perfect, but the best he can. And week after week, he comes to us and we're there with him, And that's, it's such a gift, that's what we need. More of that, and, it feels weird being my age because I'm not exactly the elder yet, but, I work with a lot of younger guys, and then I have some guys who are right around my age, but they don't have quite the experience I've had or whatever. But all of it's magic, it's really, and one of the things I talk about, and I had to learn the hard way, is that, the kind of support that we need as men, we can't expect our partners to be everything for us. Mm-hmm. It's too much to ask of one human being. And as guys, what most of us do is we're not good at having real intimate relationship with other men. The friendships that we have are usually about attending sporting events or something like that. The conversation doesn't go very deep. And then we rely on our spouse for practically everything. And it just doesn't work, So anyway.
Well, I mean, there were a couple of things there. I don't know if you remember in the episode with Traver where I was telling him I love that he's pulling in the elders. And when I say it's time for you to go be with the men, you're wanting to have all kind of men, not just men your own age, but you'll encounter men that you can offer something to because you're 2 steps ahead of them, or you'll have a guy that's 3 steps ahead of you, and then you'll have the father who's way down the road that you glean wisdom from, and then beyond that, like you said, the elder. And that's what we're missing too. We're starting to be like everyone is equal. And while that's true, I think we have equal, rights, but that experience is worth so much. And if you can find people at different stages of their journey, it's such a blessing to be able to serve and give back. And then it's also a blessing to receive. And that's what you get from a rich brotherhood, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I did hear that part. I listened to the whole thing, although I will confess I listened to it as I was drifting off into sleep. But, another thing that I've learned through all this, and, Robert Bly talks about this too, is that younger men need admiration and love from older men.
Yeah, they do.
We do. And that's something that I've learned to just show up with for younger guys. And like there's one young guy who comes to mind who I barely even remember this, but he was celebrating a milestone in recovery, like 3 years, and asked me to come to it. It might have been 5. And he heard me speak and he shared after that. And at that point, maybe he was 3 years sober, but one of the things he reminded me of is how I told him he was a good man. And that I just spoke that into him, you know, and we need that. We need that. And for me, you know, I had so many guys who were kind of doing the opposite. The, you know, abusive older brother and, you know, my dad was pretty angry, good man and all that. But, you know, I mean, he wasn't emotionally literate, you know, he was jammed up. And so I had to get that from the high school teacher, the editor, you know, people like that who, you know, gave me that kind of love and admiration and believed in me, you know. We need that.
Yeah.
Well,
and I mean, you said you can't get everything you need from your spouse or your wife or whatever. And I think that is true. And that's kind of back to that narrow lane that I feel like I have. There are times that a man, especially when he's doing his inner healing, if he's dealing with a mother wound or something from the past, there's something really powerful about being witnessed by an older woman. And having that same kind of, you're good. I'm seeing you. I'm observing you. I bless you. And it's something that they almost need to get out and get going on their journey sometimes. And I have an episode that I'm going to release soon that's a good example of that. This man that I'm interviewing just has so much. He's made a lot of progress on his journey with his brothers, but just talking about the abusive relationship he had with his stepmother. And it was just such a blessing to hold the space for him and let him talk about that and tell him, wow, you're really doing a good job. You've come such a long way, you know, offering him insight maybe on something he hadn't considered, but it can be really powerful. And that's not something that your wife can necessarily even have the experience or knowledge to hold the space for. She hasn't been there.
Yeah. Well, and what you were saying about being witnessed by an older woman, you know, for me, I mean, I've always been really open to therapy, and most of my recovery, if I wasn't actively in therapy, I at least had someone I could call but I went a number of years, just kind of knowing I needed somebody different and keeping my eyes open for who that person was. And it was a woman, and I found her, and I just kind of knew I could talk to her about love and that she wouldn't judge me. I mean, that's really what it was. She wouldn't tell me there was something wrong with me or that I was codependent or, you know, she wouldn't label me. She'd hear me. And, what I got from that ultimately, and am continuing to, you know, I saw her weekly for probably close to 3 years, and for the last year and a half or so, once a month. I had a great mom. I mean, we were close. She was a great matriarch in so many ways. But none of our parents are perfect. They don't give us everything, you know, we deserve always. Yeah. And the things that I didn't get from her, I've gotten from this therapist. She was that maternal sort of energy for me and gave me, you know, just the parts of it that I didn't get from my mom. And, Yeah, I mean, we need all of it. We really do.
I've had that experience so often, and it just might be a season. It might not be, I'm your end-all, be-all therapist forever.
Right.
Maybe it's a few months, or maybe it's a year. But that's another thing back to the men's movement that I think is a real disservice, is these absolutes. Like, you can't go see a female therapist, or you can't have a female friend, or you can't. And I get sometimes there's a lot of good reasoning behind, or maybe be careful if you see a female therapist. I can get that, because some of them might, to your point, try to label you or just make something out of a really normal thing that happened. So I do think you need to be careful who you pick, but all these absolutes, just keep people locked up and not able to get the help and the things that they need sometimes.
Yeah. Well, what I think of when you bring that up is, Pia Melody's work around codependency. She talks about, one of the core symptoms, as the inability to experience one's reality moderately. Everything's black and white, and that's not how life works. The good stuff's in the gray areas. It is. And go ahead.
Also, well, I was just going to say, it's also when the men's groups are just masculine, you're leaving off half of reality. And so if we're celebrating the sun and we're not ever talking about the moon, well, the moon's crazy. I never know what time it's going to rise. Sometimes it's half there. Sometimes that's the mystery. That's the darkness. That's the other half of reality, Mm-hmm. And when we talk about the knight that killed the dragon, why did he do that? To save the damsel. Mm-hmm. To save the beauty and the mystery. And that absoluteness, and that the way we deal with reality, if we only are focusing on one side of it, we're going to be uptight. And if we're not dancing, we're not going to be as healthy as we could be.
Yeah. I see. Well, I mentioned, never date a feminist. I've seen, never take her back if she breaks up with you. Ever. Never, ever give someone a second chance.
Never date a woman with kids.
Never date a woman with kids.
I mean, it's so many rules.
There really are. There really are.
They wonder why everybody's drinking themselves or just sitting in their basement watching pornography. It's like, it's too hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah. What do you think about all the Andrew Tate stuff?
That high value man thing. I don't know if that's what you mean.
Well, I don't like that term. I don't. I mean,
right. I feel like this is the way I look at the Andrew Tate Club, and I'm just including all those like high value men type. And there's a lot of absolutes in that. That's where, the guys are like, well, body count. They quote a lot of statistics. Mm-hmm. Well, statistically speaking, to me, that self, that spiritual element, whether you want to assign it to spiritual or not, but that self, that uncorrupted, incorruptible essence that we all have is something deeper. And so I feel like when you are in touch with that and you're going on that journey, you're seeking the kingdom. You're seeking something different. And that's at a meta level, which we've really lost sight of in the last 500 years with the, bursting on the scenes of scientific knowledge. We exalt that so highly, what we can know. So we've lost sense of the mystery. And so when the knights would go off to battle or whatever, they would take the handkerchief of the lady. Mm-hmm. They knew why they were doing what they were doing, for truth and beauty. Whether they were right or wrong, that's what they had, a sense of what they were doing. And so I feel like these guys are trying to replicate something similar on a really carnal level. Mm. So they don't have the mystery of the self. They're trying to do it on the level of the world or on the mind or the scientific level. Mm. And it's not ever going to get you the same results.
Yeah.
So it's going to leave people empty. Like, I'm going to get this hot chick that all my bros are going to be really impressed with. But the way I got her was I was at the top of the dominance hierarchy. And the minute I fall down one step, she's going to go to the guy ahead of me. And they'll say this, but they're not getting the message that there's something maybe wrong with our system.
Right.
Maybe we need to go to a different system of, trying to be righteous. And I know that word's really loaded, but it's a deeper level. It's a deeper meaning. Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And I know why I am.
Well, and I think, all this stuff just drives me crazy. But, we're dying to feel connected.
Yeah.
So why don't we figure out, instead of trying to create all these rules of how we need to do it this way and that way, and if she doesn't do this, then I'm gone and all. How about, and here's where it really gets sticky, the whole friend zone thing, the whole friend zone. Well, how about you just try to connect with another human being? How about that? Why don't we focus on that? Why don't we focus on who she is as a human being and having a quality relationship with this other human being, rather than being fixated on how she may or may not categorize me?
Yeah. And, in fairness, there are some really worldly women. And when I say that, I mean, they're just not seeking that deeper level of consciousness, and they're playing a game.
Yeah.
And they want to win too. So if you mess with those women, you're going to have to abide by the rules of that game.
Yeah.
And to me, the rules of the kingdom, if you're pursuing as a man excellence, if you're seeking to become the humble, benevolent king, if you're seeking to become the disciplined warrior, if you're seeking to become the magician who shares his secret knowledge to make the world a better place, if you're seeking to become a lover, then you're going to attract a woman who's seeking to become a queen, and a warrior in her own right, and a magician and a lover, and you two can build your kingdom together.
Yeah.
So it depends on the quality of who you're becoming, and it depends on the quality of the person that you're picking. And I think a lot of men, and pornography plays into this, and that high value men stuff plays into this. They're letting their pecker do the picking, like the millionaire matchmaker used to say. And they're not taking their mind and who feeds my mind and who feeds my soul and who am I also sexually attracted to. It's just who's going to impress the guys and put me at the top of the dominance hierarchy.
Well, and I mean, it's also, what do I need to do to be a complete, happy human being on my own?
Yes.
So that I'm in the right frame of mind and I'm looking for the right things and I'm attracting, just like you said. I mean, that's been my experience, I mean, at this point in my life, being in a relationship with someone who I would have never had the ability to connect with the way I can. There's just no way. Not even 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, it's your individual pursuit of excellence. You're going deeper. You're becoming a good mother and father to yourself. You're looking at what you didn't get from your mother and father, and you're trying to provide that for yourself. You're doing the work that you need to do. And so you're attracting a woman who's probably very like that. She's doing her own work. And that pursuit of excellence, if you're a young man listening, it will never be the wrong move. If you're becoming a man that you can look in the mirror and be satisfied with, that's really the key.
Well, and for me, it's the only thing that works.
Yeah.
It is. And it started, this is where, my alcoholism, it's where our brokenness becomes our strength if we allow it to, and Richard Rohr talks about, And this is where we don't look at the meta stuff in life, you know. In life, we all have ascents and descents. And I was at my descent at that time in my life. And the ascent, you know, there would have been no ascent if there wasn't for the descent, you know?
Yeah.
And one of the things he says that I love, you mentioned mystery. And I think about the things, a lot of the messages that men get, like from pop psychology sort of stuff. The things we say aren't really messages that are going to resonate with guys, you know? And I think vulnerability is the big example of that to me. When, you know, we use that expression, what we really are asking the person to do is to summon their courage to be real. Mm-hmm. That a guy can hear, but you need to be vulnerable. I mean, I every day hear guys saying they want you to be like women. That's why they say that. But one of the things Richard Rohr, I heard him say is, and he was talking specifically about religion and why women are more engaged in religion at this time in our history, far more than men. And he said, it's about naming the mystery of human transformation in a language that grabs the souls of men. Mm. And that's what I want to do. You know, I want to fire guys up, you know, to go be the best men that they can be and to recuperate their vitality that they lost from numbing themselves systematically, you know? So, oh man, I've really, really enjoyed this. I feel like we could go on. And I haven't even asked you anything about yourself. So what I'm going to ask of you is that you definitely come back and we connect again soon to schedule a time where I don't just get carried away talking to you about all the stuff that I get super excited about. And I want to hear about what brought you here, you know?
Yeah. I mean, to me, connecting with somebody who wants to talk about deeper things is such a treat, and it's such a rare occurrence these days. And being able to just hold the space and allow each other to speak. We don't have to necessarily agree 100% on everything, but it's just really delightful, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll definitely be in touch with you about Thanks for listening to the show. Please subscribe, leave a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. You can learn more about my other podcasts by visiting thepathtooauthenticity.com or by clicking the link in the show notes. Music is by the band Punk Rock Opera, used under a Creative Commons license and with permission from the artist. The show is produced by me, Tom Gentry. You can find more of my work on Substack, including a podcast only available to paid subscribers. So again, thanks for listening. Keep coming back. Be nice.
Great, honey.